Hi everyone, this is Rowye again from this not so warm Mediterranean lands. I've got a bit of a cold today, so I'm gonna apologize first for my voice. If it's even huskier than normal, that's just because I'm just getting sick. And I know it's gonna get worse. I'm gonna just try to get through this video before that happens. Because it has been actually quite nice for me on YouTube since the last voiced video. I've had one or two new subscribers every day, even though I haven't posted anything new. So that really made me feel like there's someone out there and that you guys care about this. So here I am with the next one. So as usual in this kind of artwork, I start with DAZ Studio. I go first for the body shapes. I have different morphs from different packages, and I try to mix them up a little bit so it won't look just like one thing. A lot of that you get by later on adding photos and whatever you want on top of it. But even then, I like to do that in the 3D part of the process as well. I mix up different wardrobes so it doesn't have just one set of clothes that people who are familiar with that already know. And when I got the clothing down and when I got the shape down, then I start looking at the poses. Mostly what I do is just look around at the poses I have from different packages and try one out, try another out, see if one of them is good, looks good, gives me any ideas. Because I generally have no idea what I'm gonna do in Photoshop at this point. So I'm just looking around and seeing if something catches my eye. So for me this phase is mostly just having fun with it. I start to think about what the scene is going to be like. So I'm also starting to think about the point of view. I know this is a villain, so I kind of want people to look at it from below, like he's a really powerful being. I want him to be like really, really epic. So as you see, I'm also working on the lighting already. I start adding sort of a backlight or a side light, really strong one. And this is just the eye candy light. Is the one that's going to give us those highlights we really want so that we can have a whole range of levels in the figure. And as you see, I have another much dimmer light. But what's really going to light up the image anyway is the environment light. That's from a preset I got, the one that's got this strong blue light. I wanted to use this side light, which later on I discarded, but at this point everything is subject to change, and this is almost ready for Photoshop. So this is where I'm most comfortable in, which is creating environments. Definitely much more than making characters. This is one of the reasons I'm doing these artworks, which is I want to practice the things I don't know how to do. So this is a bit of a journey I take with you guys as I learn myself how to go through this and how to use 3D to make characters and how to add stuff to that. But as you saw, the first thing I did was build a perspective grid, and unless you're doing a flat shot, you really want to use a perspective grid. You want to stick to the perspective because otherwise something is going to look really odd in your artwork. You might not be able to tell, or people looking at it might not be able to tell what it is, but the human brain can still tell something's not right. And what I'm doing now is I'm working with custom shapes. If you're not familiar with them, custom shapes are a super efficient way to block out shapes. It's super fast, and you can create them yourself from your own photos or from stock photos. That's what I did because I find it really difficult to find good, useful custom shapes that are free. So, I just made my own. And I use them a lot, and as you see, I'm sticking to the perspective when I place them down. They come down in the original shape, but then you can bend and transform them over to fit whatever shape you need. And for this whole phase of the process, what I'm gonna do is just block the most important stuff in the background or in the whole scene. I'm gonna look at the sky colors and so therefore the atmosphere. I'm also adding some green texture deliberately in the background. That doesn't necessarily look very good right now, but what I just want is some sort of non-flat background to work on. When I drop other photos on it, then what's gonna happen is this texture is gonna stay in the background and kind of make the photos look less photo-ish. And speaking of photos, as you see, what I'm doing is I'm mixing some digital painting with just plain photos, and the photos are just a couple of photos of the same castle. Both of them have enough dark and bright areas so that I can play with that. I want to keep always in mind what the lighting is. I know that the light is coming from the left side, and I don't want all the background to be completely in shadow. I want something interesting in there. So at some point I'm gonna start adding these brighter castle walls and towers, and I'm also gonna start moving away from the perspective as I used it until this point. So because I wanna have a little bit of contrast up there, not only with light but also with shapes. Mostly I don't want it to be boring, and I think this gives it a very nice touch. Also, I can tell the shapes of the towers are just not fitting the custom shapes I'd used previously. I just changed the shapes and redo that part. What was interesting about the shapes I had previously set is that I had the main shape, the main composition lines, and if I have to change the particular shapes, it's not a big deal for me. It's really just part for the course. So as you see, I'm also working on the very background. That's an area that doesn't need so much detail as the rest, because most of it is going to be covered or it's just going to be too far away to be appreciated. Mostly what you want to do with that is just kill the dark levels and make sure your color fits with the sky color. And if you got that, then you're good. Now, for the foreground, then we go back to the perspective grid and being very careful with how we set it up. As small as this may seem, these are the closest possible to the camera, so to speak. So you really want these to give a good indication of what the view angle is. And of course, to make a good perspective happen, you have to touch on both axes. So this is why I'm cutting these little bits off the side and adapting them to the new perspective. And so the last thing I'm going to touch on is the sky. I just find a very nice stock photo I like and leave it there. And this is pretty much ready for the final effects. I know we're only like halfway through the video, but this is when I try them out and then I disable them again. Let's see it. So yeah, I had an internal debate to whether I should put this here or just cut him off and put him at the end of the video, because that's generally where most people will do the final effects. The reason I do them now is because the whole scene is set up already, so I do know now what the scene is gonna look like when it's finished, the way I was working on it. So for me it's a good time now to experiment with some effects and some color changes to see what I can achieve with what I have now. And like the last time, I'm gonna start with color effects, and then I'm gonna use the sharpener from the same Nik plugins, and finally I'm gonna add some color aberration with analog effects. And while doing that, I'm still checking around, looking at presets and seeing if something calls my attention, something picks my eye. Sometimes I do find something, sometimes I don't. The more you use the plugins, the more you know where to look for it. And even after that, I'm still gonna play with color adjustments and some color lookup layers. But now very much we have what the artwork is gonna look like when it's finished. Even if the details are missing, but we got the color, lighting, and so forth. And from here on, really nothing big is gonna change. I'm just gonna be adding stuff, changing stuff, adjusting stuff, but the main body of the artwork is there. The light is set, the color is set, and that's what you want from the composition phase mostly. And if you got that right, anything you do on top of that is going to be good. And unfortunately, that works both ways. So if you got a bad composition, no matter how long you spend detailing it, it's always gonna have something that's off. So you really want to have it tight before you go into full detailing. Because the last thing you want to do is spend many, many hours on a piece that finally is not really gonna work. Meanwhile, in the video, we see how I take the easy route because I like doing environments. So the characters are hard for me, so I'm spending the first few hours of detailing just working on the background and on the foreground and pretty much ignoring the character because it's intimidating. Um, so as you see, I'm mostly just painting over the photos. I want especially the parts that are going to be in the forefront to not be very photo-like because the 3D model itself doesn't look very photo-like at all. It doesn't look realistic, especially. So what I want to achieve is some sort of the same look for everything in the photo. The photos have to be more painterly. The puppet has to be more painterly. The background has to be a bit more painterly. Um, in the end, I'm trying to create the impression that you don't really know if this is a photo, is a painting, is a 3D image. You're not supposed to know what medium this is. Whether I achieve that or not, well, that's for you to decide, I guess. Um, as I said, these are my own experiments streamed for you, so you can see all of my mistakes just the same. And I think that's what's interesting about these kind of videos, that you can see the whole thought process that went into the artwork more than the specific techniques, because it's so fast that it's really hard to see. But I'm trying to give you guys an open look into what the process is more than the specific things. Now, this is gonna be a long time detailing, so it's actually quite possible I'll go more into specifics. But now in the video, I've started working on the character. The wand, I felt it was kind of boring. I wanted it to be more evil, and so I went with the sharp shapes. Then I started working on the hair. I'm mostly looking at the shapes. I wanted to give the artwork a little bit more of movement, and I'm not really worrying very much about whether the hair is gonna look crazy good or not. Um, this is sort of an evil guy. He's creepy. He's not gonna have crazy nice hair. He's not a glam guy. So I'm mostly looking at the shape, at the movement. As you see, I started with a big brush and then I start lowering the brush size. I'm not even using hair brushes here for the most part. Some point I do a little bit of reflections, but it's mostly gonna stay black, black and evil. So here I'm starting to add photos on the picture. I'm trying to make the armor much cooler than it is and just have more items to it. And when I'm designing these on the 3D phase of the artwork, I'm already thinking what kind of things I'm gonna add or what kind of things I'm gonna change, what things are gonna be missing. And sometimes I'll make more than one render. If I have some piece of armor or clothing that I think is gonna look good but not all of it, maybe I want to render without that part so I can then mix both renders, but it just wasn't necessary here. So now what I'm gonna start doing, besides changing the skin color, is adding texture And with 3D models, texture is really important because the thing with 3D models is that they're way too perfect. The skin has no blemishes. I mean, the texture may have some, but the shape in the render doesn't, so it's very easy to tell it's a 3D render. So what happens when you add texture is you make it look more human. I mean, if it's a human, if it's not a human, you make it look more organic anyway. Because there's nothing as perfect as a 3D render. And this is a greedy creature. He's supposed to be evil and dark, so his skin has to play the part too. And with the second texture I placed in there, something great happened, which is something that happens sometimes when you use textures and you place them randomly over a model or whatever. And that's that it just created some shapes that brought my attention to them. And by using those and enhancing those, I got these new fur parts, which they wasn't really anything I planned before. The same happened with the shoulder pad. I didn't plan for that, but there was half of the shape created by the texture, and I just drew the rest, and then I just drew the fur on top of the other parts, and now I have like some sort of half an armor there. And as you see, what I'm doing is just I keep painting details, keep adding little stuff. It becomes quite easy when you have all the base colors and levels already set down by either the 3D render or the scene building that you did before. So now I just have to press Alt and pick a color and paint around it, and everything pretty much fits. And right around this point, I got to one of these artist low moments where I didn't know where to go, how to continue. There was this green light hitting the work's body, and I really didn't like that. I mean, I did like the color, I liked the effect it created in the whole image, but it didn't make any sense because it was coming from the wrong side, right? I mean, the green is coming from the wand, and that was on this other side. So I did some tests, and I did ask some people as well, and so props to the people who helped me with that. And I'm just saying this so that you understand also that all of us have bad moments, and all of us get stuck. And sometimes you just need someone to tell you what's right and what's wrong, because you are absolutely drunk on your own art, and you have absolutely no capacity to tell what's right and wrong anymore. And for me on this one, it took a while. It was actually a few months. I let it go, I placed it in the bin, and I waited until inspiration came back, and when it came back it was strong, so I finished it pretty much the same day. That was like around 10 hours of work. The whole video is around 40 hours total. This is all sped up 25x, so except for the effects part, which I halved the speed so you guys could tell what's going on. But yeah, everything else is 25 times faster. So yeah, it's a long work. It was a lot of time just adding details and working on the character, which is where I really feel I'm weakest at. So I wanted to spend time on it so I can learn some techniques and find out my own ways to create it. And meanwhile, as you see in the video, I'm still working on the background. There are parts that I'm not happy with, or I didn't like the shapes. So I'm going back to using custom shapes for the main shapes. Then I add texture onto it for more detail. Also note that I'm still making sure that I keep in mind at all times where the light is coming from and where things have been shaded or are in shadow. So I try to keep the realism all the way through the whole image, even for the small parts. And that's the same when you're adding even smaller stuff like the belt or the hair I'm gonna add here. You want to have every element in the right levels as soon as possible, because light and color are perceived through contrasts, and the more things that you have that are off, the harder it's going to be for you to tell if the next thing you add is off or not. So you want to try to get them as good as possible as soon as possible. And one of the things I just used is match color, which is something I don't see used very much. And this is a super useful tool, because if you have a photo or a layer that's only one specific thing, like I now had this bunch of hair from the cow, and that's separated in its own layer. So if you have that, you can take another layer with a similar texture or like similar like a different kind of hair, for instance. And with match color, you can just make one of them have the color of the other. So it's really easy to transpose the color. It's really fast, and it generally does it quite good. You have to adjust maybe luminosity or whatever, but it is much faster than trying to do it manually. Now, sometimes it's just not going to work, so you'll still have to put the hard work in, but if it does, then, well, it's just a time saver. And as you see, sometimes I'm still working with the green on, the backlight that I wanted to remove, and that's because what I did is I grouped the whole character, and on top of that I added a hue saturation layer that affects the whole thing. So what happens is that these kind of layers are really useful, but they really do eat up your computer's power so badly. So what I have to do a lot of the time to work inside the group is just to undo the whole thing, hide the saturation layer, and then when I'm done working inside the group, I have to activate all of that again. And here's another thing I wanted to talk about, which is the blend options inside the layer style panel. And this is another super powerful tool. And the way it works is it creates a mask based on lighting levels, so you can hide or show different ranges of light. So whatever you put on this layer can affect only dark areas or only bright areas. And as you can imagine, this is a great tool, especially to do stuff like reflections and stuff like that. One of the things I see a lot is when people add new sources of light to the images, they will add bright light to a contour of a model or something, but the very dark spots that are in deep shadow should not be lit by that. So with this kind of selection, which is just a layer style, you can very easily mask out the parts you don't want to be touched by whatever you're doing. And you can see I'm doing that in the upper left corner. I'm painting some light or reflection on the leg, and I'm also doing that in the actual speed art video when I'm adding the green light. And I'm doing that because since I removed the other green light, I feel like now there's a lack of color in the whole image, and we have this green glowing wand, and so I want to enhance that, just take advantage of what is already there. So I paint the green light using these blend options, making sure that the darkest parts are not affected by it. And then I add this nice effect with these sort of fractal lights. I just turn them into the same green, and they look pretty nice just right out of the box already, so I'm quite happy with that. And then we have a quick look of what it looks like with the effects. I'm just checking around, and the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move a little bit of the background, because when I added the effect on the wand, I feel like I covered a lot of the detail in the background. I feel like maybe some of the most interesting parts are not seen anymore. And so what I do with that is just at this point where I have been so long working on it, I'm happy with it. So I just merge the whole background or the whole castle, and I just cut it, move it, set it back into the perspective, and that's where it's gonna stay. And from now on, if I need to move it or change it or do whatever to it, I'm just gonna paint on top. And worst case scenario, I can recover the old layers and make a mask. Either way, this is towards the end of the process, so I'm not really worried about it. And from here on, it's gonna be just a lot of detailing and little stuff, fixing things here, arranging there. Also keep in mind that all this time I know exactly what it's gonna look like once the final adjustments are on it. So it's not shown very much in the video, but all the time I'm checking what it's gonna look like, so I know exactly what adjustments do I have to make so that it's gonna enhance those effects later on. And that's how I work most of the time. Also, by now I'm already merging the whole character into one single layer, and that's just to do stuff like what you see now. And I'm also going to move the leg. I'm going to use Liquify for that, because all the time, all these hours, I've known that that leg was a little bit off, so it's been bothering me all the time. And once I get to the point where I can merge the character, I'm so happy that I can finally arrange it. So in the end, it's just fun to see everything come together. There are things that you thought that were gonna be super hard that in the end become quite easy. Some of the things that you thought were gonna be easy, at times you just don't find the right way to do them. But everything is a learning experience, and it was fun to make this one. I hope it was at least a little bit of fun to watch it. If you're still watching these and listening to my rambling, thanks very much to you. I have no idea how could you take so much crap in just one sitting. So, yeah, I hope you guys have a great day and see you soon.